Thanks for listening to Star Lores. If you like the show, please consider subscribing and giving a 5-star rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also help us make more great content by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com. We would also love to hear from you on social media. You can follow Star Lores on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Enjoy the show, and may the Force be with you.
You are listening to the Star Lores Podcast.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
I'm going to start with a controversial question. Do you remember when Star Wars was good? That question could mean so many things to so many people. To some, it means the 1980s when the original trilogy was released. It could be a nostalgic feeling for the prequel era, or the endless immensity of the expanded universe. And for many, it could be the time before The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. My name is Christian.
And I'm Jordan. This podcast is going to focus on the Star Wars Legends and Star Wars Expanded Universe before it was bought out by Disney. Although it will not completely exclude Disney's Star Wars, we will often make comparisons with the new material and even, eventually, a review. We are going to focus on the history and the lore of the Star Wars universe. This will include all the facets of the Star Wars universe, movies, games, and books.
The movies. Although we will be talking about all the lore surrounding the Star Wars universe and the plethora of sources, it all comes back to the movies, as they are the seminal work from which all the expanded universe comes from. So on that note, we'll be ranking them.
Oh no.
So Jordan?
The first bloodbath. It begins.
Now, this is just our opinions, I just want to clarify, but just so that you get an idea of where we're coming from and how we view.
Do we want to do like just our top three, or are we going to do the whole?
Let's start with the top three.
Okay.
And let's just keep in mind that this only includes the episodic works, so we won't be including things like...
No anthology films.
No anthology films like the Christmas movie, the Star Wars Christmas movie, or the Clone Wars movie, or Star Wars Rogue One. So just episodes 1 through 7 that have been released so far. So Jordan, take it away.
Okay, my top three, I think, and probably most people would agree with this, I think The Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film of all of them, in my opinion. But I think there is mostly a consensus on that. So that's number one. My number two, maybe this is a little more debatable for people, is Return of the Jedi. I think Return of the Jedi is the second best Star Wars film. I think it lands the plane very nicely. And unlike other people, I didn't mind the Ewoks. Okay, just saying. Didn't mind the Ewoks. And then my third is Episode 4, or A New Hope, as it was later named. Yeah, those are my top three.
So Jordan, you're pretty hung up on the original Star Wars.
I gotta say, yeah, like it's those three are. It's hard for me to conceive of any of the other films that have been created being any better than the original three.
Okay, I have a very similar countdown, but it's not going to be exactly the same. So I'm starting number 1, The Empire Strikes Back, of course. For the reasons Jordan mentioned. A lot of fans, I think, would agree with that. My second choice, however, and this is going to be very controversial, but it has to be Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3.
Oh!
I did enjoy a lot of that movie. I know it's not everyone's favorite. Compared to all the other prequels, it's the best of the prequels.
I agree with that statement. It is the best of the prequels.
And I won't say it's necessarily a great film from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
But I do really like the story and how that story, concludes with Anakin and Obi-Wan.
And you can only imagine that, like, actually maybe Rogue One was like this, but pre Disney, it was a trilogy that ended as a tragedy more so than a comedy.
Yeah, yeah, the classic.
Unlike like most Disney films, which end like have like a good ending and the hero wins and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I do like a kind of a downer ending personally. And then I will have to say A New Hope. It introduces you to the universe, and I don't think you can find many flaws with even like the way the story plays out. Like, it's a very natural kind of classic adventure story. So those are kind of my three. I know the prequels have always been divisive in the community, but I'm nostalgic for them.
I saw the prequels when I was like, I think the first one I saw, I must have been like 11 or 12.
I think episode 1 came out in 1999.
Yeah, so I was like 11 or 12 at that time, and I enjoyed it, but mostly because I was 11 or 12. I don't know if like I was in a fully developed adult that I would have enjoyed it the same way but now I agree with you. I'm also nostalgic for the original or the prequel rather.
And that might be an interesting thought in general, for the movies specifically, where a lot of the older fans who were children when the original trilogy came out still have that kind of nostalgic attachment. Those of us that were born in the prequel era or old enough to enjoy the prequels, where we were the target audience.
Yeah.
And even maybe this new era of Star Wars movies might be aimed at a younger audience than those of us who've, grown up with the material. Mm-hmm. But that could be a debate on its own.
Yes. I'm sure that is a debate.
What, Jordan, is your favorite Star Wars story within the entire universe? So, it could be a video game, a comic book, novel.
I think there's actually a lot of really great stories within the universe, all the way from like thousands and thousands of years before the original trilogy and 100 years after the original trilogy. I think there's some really cool story arcs, particularly in the Star Wars sort of legend universe post episode 7. Yeah. Post episode 6, sorry. Post episode 6, like the Battle of Mon Calamari or the death of Luke Skywalker. Those are, I think, some
spoilers.
Those are some interesting story arcs. But my personal favorite has got to be actually from one of the video games, Knights of the Old Republic, and specifically Knights of the Old Republic 2. I think is my favorite story arc. I think it's really, really interesting. It's very layered and it's like philosophically deep, though I can see how it can be a little overwhelming for a lot of people if you really dove into that storyline. But anyways, I've played through that game a few times. I love it. I think it has a really interesting take on the Star Wars universe and the Force and all that kind of stuff. So,
okay, no, that's a very good pick. I think there's a lot of KOTOR fans that might agree with you.
Yes.
For myself, it's kind of hard for me to narrow it down to one story, but I really enjoy Arroweye, the whole Clone Wars multimedia project. That included like all the books and cartoons and all that came out. Comic books specifically in that period of time. I'm a huge fan of Mandalorians and Clone Troopers, which are an extension of that. And but if I have to pick one story, it's got to be my favorite character in Star Wars, the story of Darth Vader, his rise and fall and redemption. I love the tragic hero. I like that in the end, he's redeemed. As a villain, he's powerful and intimidating. He was one of my favorite Star Wars characters growing up, and to this day remains, a staple of the universe. That isn't to say there aren't lots of other great stories out there, but that's just my personal preference.
Darth Vader is up there with probably one of my favorite characters as well.
Yeah, and even beyond Star Wars, he's one of my favorite characters.
Totally,
I just love the tragic hero archetype.
Totally,
and it's not a lot, you don't get a lot of that in today's media.
No, yeah.
So while we have our own preferences out of the way, we are going to try to be as objective as possible. We might throw in our opinions here and there on maybe some of the stories, at the end of or in the middle of an episode, but we'll try to do our best to differentiate what's our opinion and what's quote unquote fact. That being said, the facts are always changing. Here we have a duel of the canons. So the Star Wars universe is so expansive. The first kind of split we do need to lay out before we start diving into the meat of the universe is the most obvious one that has happened most recently is the split between Star Wars pre-Disney and post-Disney. The George Lucas era, I guess we can call it, has now all been termed Star Wars Legends. So that is going to be the main focus of our podcast. All the content that came out before and up until Disney bought it out. Since Disney's buyout, they scrapped all the old lore and are slowly reintroducing bits and pieces that they want to keep and then rewriting a lot of what they want to see for the future. And while, like I said before, we will touch on this stuff, we might review it, we might look at it, compare it. It's not the main focus of this podcast, so I just want that to be clear. The second big split within canon is kind of a hierarchy that developed within the fans, and this was post-Disney, where George Lucas's works kind of are the definitive Star Wars story, and then it's ranked, I can't remember exactly how it's ranked, it's got to be written down somewhere, of canon authority. So whenever there's a canon conflict, because of how expansive the universe is, you have hundreds of different writers, working on all these different stories at different times. There's inevitably going to be canon conflicts. We'll do our best to smooth those over, or kind of like show people like, hey, this author said this or someone said that. But for the most part, there's a hierarchy that the fan community has developed where George Lucas's works trump everything. Anything that's directly been contracted by George Lucas kind of trumps everything else. And then beneath that, you have any kind of freelance work that was contracted by the Lucasfilm company more broadly.
So can we safely say, as much to our chagrin, that that the hierarchy of canon is the original, then the prequel, and then the new trilogy?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll get more into that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, when we kind of get into that era time-wise, we'll touch more on, where things fall in the hierarchy.
But this podcast in particular will be focusing more on the expanded universe before Disney.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, before Disney, that is the focus of this podcast, though we may reference the new Disney, and we will clarify if we reference.
We'll make it clear whenever we're talking about one or the other. And like I said, more broadly for your own, if you're looking into it yourself, it's Star Wars Legends is everything pre-Disney, and that's our main focus, and then everything else is Star Wars canon.
Yeah, and part of the reason is we think that there's like so many great Star Wars Legends stories that shouldn't be forgotten just because they are no longer quote unquote canon.
Exactly.
All right, Christian. So with all that being said, and before you wrap up this intro episode, and just so the people get to know us a little bit more, let's do our least favorite episodes, episodic movies, starting from our very least and downwards from there. So you go ahead.
Okay, so my least episode, and in light of current events, I think it's very much in line with a lot of fans. I have to say The Last Jedi is my absolute least liked Star Wars movie. I think right now there's plenty of material out there that can cover the reasons why, so I'm not going to get into it much here, but
we don't want to make this a Last Jedi hate podcast.
Yeah, not like the many that are out currently. Then my second one, I'd have to say The Force Awakens. And you can see kind of a trend here. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the Disney stuff. I think that's one of the prime reasons we started this podcast, is to kind of resurrect a lot of what was before, and just like, hey, don't forget about this stuff too. And that isn't to say I hate everything that Disney's making. They have some good things, and we'll get into that when we touch on the Disney stuff. But as far as movies go, I am not a fan of The Force Awakens either. And then kind of my least favorite after that will have to be The Clone Wars, episode 2. And this pains me because I just said that The Clone Wars is my favorite era. And I love the end of that movie, just when the battle kind of...
You do mean Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones,
Yeah.
yes, sorry.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
Not the Clone Wars.
No, episode 2, Attack of the Clones, is my least favorite movie, even though I love the ending. So I understand the technical downfalls of that movie, and there are many, don't get me wrong. Everything from the scripting to the acting, you know. But that being said, I enjoy the ending. I'm pained that it is my least liked, but I have to be honest with myself. And
You have to pick one.
yeah, and that's where that falls.
Yeah. Yeah. And then your third on that list?
So that's it.
Oh, just
I did it. Attack of the Clones.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Force Awakens,
My
and The
bad.
Last Jedi.
Cool. So I'll rank mine from starting with my least favorite. I'm with you 100%. It is The Last Jedi. It is also the last on the list of Star Wars films. So maybe it's aptly named. The good about The Last Jedi is visually, it was incredible. And even sound-wise, it sounded really good. The score was really
Yeah,
good.
you can. The technical aspects might be okay.
Totally.
And even then, I don't know.
And there were even some things like Carrie Fisher in that film was a little bit better than she was in Force Awakens. She had maybe as far as her acting chops, which still were subpar, let's call them. But in every other aspect of the film, I really highly disliked it. It was a movie I wanted to like with everything in my... I was like looking for, throughout the film, I was looking for reasons to like this movie, and it just didn't gave me nothing. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's my least favorite. And next on that list of my least favorite is Attack of the Clones. So I'm also with you on there. It's in my top 3 least favorite. Again, it's not that it didn't necessarily work, but it was, what Hayden Christensen's acting was bothersome to me in that film. There was a lot of script writing that was really weird, but there was still, again, cool elements in the film. It doesn't mean it was like a totally trash film. It's just on my list. It's there. And then third down that list, and this is begrudgingly The Phantom Menace Episode 1. I liked... That was a movie that was very conflicting to me because there were really, really cool aspects to the film, and there were really, really terrible aspects to the film.
Jar Jar.
Yeah, Jar Jar. Even the Trade Federation bosses, whatever their names, they were so forgettable.
The Nemodians.
Yeah, like there's just so many forgettable characters, annoying, the Gungans, and but there was like Darth Maul was sweet. The new lightsaber fighting was sweet. Even the introducing of like Palpatine was really cool. You could really see like a narrative arc. Anakin's character was kind of annoying, which is probably why it was a big letdown, because with that whole prequel trilogy is like Anakin, it's supposed to be all about Anakin, and he's kind of a letdown.
It's hard to advocate for the story when the main character
exactly.
is hard to like.
Yeah. But it's still like it made sense, sort of, like the story arc of all the prequels, they kind of made sense, and they at least kind of fit. So anyways, I thought the pod racing was kind of cool. I still think to
12-year-old Jordan.
Yeah. One of my favorite games also was Star Wars Pod Racers for the N64.
Okay,
so I have an affinity for pod racing. But yeah, those are my 3. It would be my least favorite is The Last Jedi. Second least favorite is Attack of the Clones. And third is The Phantom Menace.
Sounds about right. And on that note, I think that concludes our intro episode. Just kind of gives you an idea of kind of what we're about, where we're going, and the direction of our podcast. And I really like the way you phrased it, Jordan, is that we really want to expand into Star Wars Legends, expanded universe, because these are stories that shouldn't be forgotten.
Yeah. And thanks for listening. We hope you guys listen to the next few episodes we have coming out, and may the Force be with you.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Are you stuck-up, half-witted, scruffy-looking nerf herder?
But I was going into Toshi Station to pick up some power converters.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to give the show a 5-star rating and review, and give us a follow on social media. This episode was produced and edited by me, Jordan Swaim, written and directed by Christian Lutz and Sam Swaim. All original music was scored and recorded by my music project, Farewell to Shadowland.